Imagine for a moment that you're all dressed up and ready to go to that great party you've been looking forward to, or just going to work and double checking that you're really dressed for success, or for that hot date. You look into the mirror, but what you see in the mirror isn't really you, is it? It's just an image of yourself. Its existence involving the laws of physics and neurosciences, with the bouncing light beams and reversed images making it possible to see what our neurological wiring allows. But there are mirrors and there are mirrors, one having to do with perceiving how we appear, and one having to do with perceiving who we are. Science tells us that we can only see a very few things, and that if we saw it all, it would become extremely lost. That's a little too far down, guys. It would become extremely lost in it all. And so we're wired, so to speak, to see only one thing at a time. It's been said that human vision system only captures a really tiny fraction of the light that's available. Reality is a bigger picture than we could possibly have understood before. Researchers in the new field of cognitive neuroscience tell us that our brain can only interpret a small number of signals during a perception. Marcus Raichle points out that of the virtually unlimited information available in the world around us, the equivalent of 10 billion bits per second arrives at the retina, at the back of the eye, but by the time all the necessary processing is completed, the amount of information constituting that conscious perception is less than 100 bits per second. Raichle continues, such a thin stream of data probably could not produce a perception if that were all the brain took into account. The intrinsic activity within the brain must play a role. It seems then that we are very limited in our ability to visualize or perceive the totality of reality given our wiring. But what about that intrinsic activity in the brain? What is it? It turns out that modulation of a functional MRI, blood oxygen level dependent or bold signal from the brain, has until recently been attributed to what was being done to the experimental subjects in each experiment, the poke and wiggle of it, basically. However, spontaneous modulation of the bold signal, which cannot be attributed to the experimental paradigm or to any other explicit input or output, is also present. Because it's been viewed as noise, in task-response studies, the spontaneous component of the bold signal is usually minimized through averaging. That spontaneous bold activity represents what is now called the brain's default mode, and the neural networks wherein it is detected represent the default mode network, or the DMN. While the brain at rest, which is the state of the brain wherein these spontaneous bold signals are being detected, represents only 2% of the total body mass, it consumes 20% of the body's energy, most of which is used to support this nonstop signaling that goes on in the absence of any task or environmental stimulus. The emphasis on some brain research in this area puts the limit of brain frequencies studied to less than 0.1 hertz as its target. This is essentially in the range of slow cortical potentials, or SCPs, that are equated with DC potentials. SCPs are the neurophysiological correlate of that fMRI bold signal, which has been discovered to be another way to measure the activity of the spontaneous signal modulation that the bold fMRI measurement is picking up. So what is known to be going on during this major component of brain activity, or the default mode? Actually very little right now. But some research reported by he and Raichle supports a functional role of the SCP in the emergence of conscious awareness and includes attention, volition, and perception. In earlier research studies that involved taking DC potential measurements from the body, indications of correlations were found between higher states of consciousness, such as in meditation, healing meditation, and spontaneous Kundalini experience, and changes in the DC potential signals. Some results, especially those involving apparent Kundalini activity, involved dramatic spontaneous fluctuations. The concern about the adequacy of our perception also resounds in another area of science, physics, in this case quantum mechanics. In reference to the holographic principle of the universe, or of reality, and to the theoretical framework from Heisenberg's uncertainty principle to complementarity that preceded this holographic principle, the Stanford physicist Leonard Susskind has concluded that reality has more to do with biology and evolution and with our hard wiring and neural architecture than it has to do with physics itself. Susskind suggests that physics needs to shift from dealing with reality and agrees with Bohr's perspective that scientists should confine themselves to making and testing empirical predictions and to the cause of reproducibility. Susskind states that we're prisoners of our neural architecture. Ironically, this sentiment is echoed in the words of a great sage of the Eastern tradition of Vedanta, Swami Vivekananda. But Vivekananda offers us a solution to this hard wiring problem. In talking about self-realization and human development evolution, Vivekananda encourages people to break the bonds of the nervous system and go wireless. He states the mind has made the network of the nervous system, and it has to break it so that no wires will be required to work through. Then alone will all knowledge come to us, no more bondage of the body. Our range of vision is only one plane of the vibrations of prana. All the great prophets, saints, and seers of the world, what did they do? In one span of life, they lived the whole life of humanity, traversed the whole length of time that it takes an ordinary man over many lifetimes to come to perfection. Vivekananda further declares this can be accomplished by doing spiritual practices and thereby taking control of the, quote, electrical systems within the body that do make the world perceivable, but at the same time bind us perceptually to a reality that is not that which we humans have as our natural birthright. Vivekananda's exhortation essentially corroborates Suskind's further remarks that reality might be beyond our limited capacity to visualize it. These principles become visualizable through mathematical relations and abstractions, and we are simply not biologically equipped for abstraction. Susskind has described the holographic principle many times through numerous venues. It bears repeating here because of its relevance to perception and uncanny relationship to key concepts in Kashmir Shaivism. He states, by now the holographic principle of the universe is an accepted basic principle of science. Information is stored on a kind of mirrored holographic film at the edges of the universe. This two-dimensional version surrounds our 3D reality. For example, it's as if the room we're sitting or standing in has on its walls, has mirror-like walls and ceilings, and in a completely scrambled form, all the information that is contained in the space of the internal 3D volume in the room itself. So information is stored on a kind of shiny holographic film on the edges of the universe, with the universe having a spherical shape in this model, as discussed by Mundane and anti-de Sitter space, conformal field theory, and we're not going to get into that today. We'll try that tomorrow. A little bit more physics. This particular quote came from I don't know if you guys know about it, but there's on the Science Channel a really cool show that's got some good science called Through the Wormhole. Every once in a while I tune in. The host of the show, in this case, on this Susskind summary, Morgan Freeman, summarizes the whole thing by saying, our normal perceived version of reality, this 3D space in which we live, is just one version of reality. The other version exists on a flat holographic film billions of light years away at the edge of the cosmos. Everything we think is here is mirrored out there at the very edge of our mysterious universe. So, what's real? Many physicists are left with the question, which reality is real? Our 3D or the 2D on the edge of the cosmos? And most, like Susskind, believe there can be only one, not both. And only one perspective can exist and result in only one kind of perception of reality. But is this absolutely true? A depiction of this two-perspective universe would look something like this ball with a clown inside, with a 3D clown inside the sphere and the 2D image of the clown flat on the shiny light sheet surface of that spherically shaped universe. It's hard to resist pointing out a parallel here that most of mainstream science would probably not jump up and down about doing by itself. It's an image that may be genetically imprinted in most of our collective psyches by now, especially if we were brought up in certain spiritual traditions. Cathedral and church domes. Did you ever wonder why we keep painting encoded information in the form of sacred symbols or holy people or of saints and angels on the lighted domes that hover above us in many cathedrals and churches here in our 3D reality? Seeing this after learning about the holographic principle of the universe, it's hard not to wonder why we've come up with such a theory and which notion influenced the discovery of which in actuality. This image itself is reminiscent of one that represents a key concept in an essential aspect of ancient Kashmir Shaivism theories of the nature of reality and the universe, believe it or not. It could lead one to believe that physics is actually heading in the right direction with attempting to understand reality, even if some of its leading scientists like Susskind don't think that it is. The great sage Swami Muktananda urged physicists and other scientists to do research in their own internal laboratories for the experience of the subtle phenomena that they are attempting to research by ordinary scientific methods. He stated, "The yogi becomes his own scientific instrument for the exploration of consciousness." Punctuating this advice regarding the importance of personal experience of one's own nature, the Spandakataka says, when the yogi's consciousness pervades all things by his desire to perceive, then why speak much? He will experience it for himself. And so we have these talks that we keep talking, right? Laksman Joo, a great sage of the Kashmir Shaivism tradition, outlines for us some of the essential basic tenets of the non-dual psychospiritual tradition of Kashmir Shaivism. One of special relevance for today's talk is called the theory of the alphabet, which actually incorporates several key notions of Kashmir Shaivism. The whole universe is manifested by Lord Shiva as one with his own nature. So in his own self as a reflection of his will. So the creation of the universe is the outcome of this reflection. But it's not your typical type of reflection. The reflection of the universe, which takes place in Lord Shiva's own nature, is like the reflection which takes place in a cup-shaped mirror. Lord Shiva takes the form of a cup and puts another cup in front of his nature. And in that second cup, which is inseparable from him, the reflection of the universe takes place. In this reflection of the universe, the reflected and the reflector are inseparable. It is Shiva, light, and Shakti, the awareness of light, the energy holder and his energy, or Shiva's power that generates the cosmic picture in the mirror of consciousness. Shiva is full of 5 energies that represent the 16 vowels of the Sanskrit alphabet and are the Shiva Tattva, or principle. Creation occurs with these vowels and the rest of the Sanskrit alphabet rolling out the universe and a human being, principle by principle, ultimately to its manifestation in matter. So we are all essentially walking, talking universes. The actual vibration of these Sanskrit phonemes, or letter sounds, literally create the universe. So the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet can be thought of as a code, much like a computer code that runs a computer, that can be decoded into the manifest universe of everything that is ever likely to be. Sanskrit has in fact been found by researchers in artificial intelligence, or AI, like Rick Briggs of NASA, to be the nature of machine language, and that AI has reinvented a wheel that is millennia old. Furthermore, researchers in mathematics have found evidence that Sanskrit is the basis for algebra, which is in turn the basis in one way or another for most, if not all, of mathematics. And it's been through mathematical modeling that physicists have arrived at the holographic principle of the universe and preceding theories like the black hole complementarity. Okay, that being said, a representation of the universe per Kashmir Shaivism might be depicted something like this. With the 2 cups fused together and the Sanskrit alphabet on the surface boundary of the light sheet sphere, containing all that is ever likely to be, in the form of the Sanskrit phonemes. As the cups are fused, the light, Shiva, and Sanskrit letters, Shakti, blend together, resulting in a mirrored surface with seriously encoded or scrambled information involving the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. Remind you of something else? It's pretty impressive that it can be reminding us of that thing. Okay. The heart of Kashmir Shaivism is generally acknowledged to be the 36 Tatfas, or principles. It's a Sanskrit word that means basically principle or element, and the model of the manifestation of the universe and a human being that the Tatfas comprise. By way of overview, the Tatfas are divided into 3 sections. Here at the bottom are the grossest, with earth being bottommost. Next is a section where the limited individual perceiver is located and includes mind, what the Vedanta, anyone describing Tattvas would call Purusha Prakriti, etc. The 2 lower sections taken together represent whom or what most of us consciously think or believe we are most of the time. Here, subject and object are perceived to be separate, a realm of differentiation. The realm of the limited individual perceiver is said to be impure because the perceiver and the world of objects appear to be different from the absolute, not at one with the absolute. The uppermost section includes who we really are, way up at the top, and the pure stages leading up to it. They're called pure here because it's here that there is no sense of separation from Shiva, God, the absolute. Subject and object are perceived to be the same in this realm of pure creation. Time, space, and natural law do not exist here. In the higher tattvas, the perception is one of unity with the absolute and consequently with all there is. In this model of manifestation, we're faced with a similar situation as physicists studying the holographic principle of the universe. 2 different versions of reality, which is real. In this case, both do exist and are quite real. But it is said that the one that you live in depends upon your perception, with the ability to perceive non-ordinary reality being a matter of your state of consciousness, which is dependent upon your psychospiritual developmental stage. So the answer to the question posed earlier, is it absolutely true that only one reality can exist because there's only one possible way of perceiving reality, is no. Implicit in the tradition of Kashmir Shaivism is the notion that 2 different realities, or formats of reality, do exist, and what determines which is perceived is the state of consciousness and therefore perspective of the perceiver. For contemplation of what you really are, listen to this. The Absolute, or Paramashiva, is supreme experience. The Absolute is perception. What you really are is the Absolute. Therefore, what you really are is perception. What you really are is supreme experience. Allow that to sink in as we continue. Our emphasis today is on the highest range of the tattvas and how perception can play a role in becoming established in them. Topmost is Paramashiva, simultaneously both transcendent and immanent, and therefore neither. Paramashiva has many names. Among them are the Absolute, consciousness with a capital C, supreme experience, and many, many others. It has been said that the Absolute is the light of consciousness and direct experience. Next is Shiva Shakti, living light and the awareness of living light. They're considered one tattva here. The next 3, called Sadashiva, Ishvara, and Shuddhavidya, tattvas come in line. In the Sadashiva tattva, it's in the Sadashiva tattva that we find the first moment of perception, representing direct perception. It's the realm of Pashanti Vak, or the voice of intuition. This is the state of the pure intuition that results in the aha moments, the source of genius and creativity, direct perception, perception before any thoughts can form, just the thing as it is in itself. In fact, all the yogic powers manifest here, but it is said that the wise forego a focus on them to attain to the higher states of the Absolute, where they will attain everything, living completely in the state of the Supreme Self. As far as the inadequate wiring problem goes, remember that problem? It was of concern to scientists and described by Swami Vivekananda, who finally gave us a solution for it. Here's where we as the cosmic electricians get to work on addressing it with the help of grace. The great sage Utpaladeva tells us that the two finest pranas, or phases of the life force, are called Udana and Vayana, and they have a special character only known in Kashmir Shaivism. They vivify body and mind in a special way so as to help gradually lift us up to the highest states of being. Udana gradually lifts us up to Shiva Shakti, and all-pervasive Vayana, the finest prana, said to be Paramashiva itself, takes us further to be the highest supreme experience of Paramashiva, the stage of psychospiritual development for which humanity is ultimately intended. These processes of Udana and Vayana repair the apparent problem of our faulty or inadequate wiring when it comes to being able to perceive reality accurately and completely. How do we facilitate the repair process? This model of the manifestation of the universe can be understood in two ways. One, vertically, as the movement of the Absolute down into its manifestation and back, or involution, and in consonance with the emanation and withdrawal of diversity. Secondly, it can be seen horizontally as the movement of awareness towards and away from the object during the act of perception. So that's the 3D version of this 2D slide. If you, actually the analogy of that shade is great for this, because if you could imagine that slide being pulled down and let go and flip back up like a gazillion times a second, that's how the universe is actually manifested. We're like dots in a movie, or what they used to say, frames of the films in a movie. We're constantly being created, constantly, the Big Bang every gazillisecond, so to speak. And when it comes to a human being, with our perception, we're creating the universe for ourselves. Each act of perception, then, can be analyzed into 16 moments or phases, it is said. They range from the initial moment of unity, that of pure Shiva consciousness, up to the presentation of the object as it appears to the individual in the earth element. Establishment in this state of the pure Shiva consciousness reveals powers that evolution regains. It is during the transition of the moment, the state in which thought is momentarily suspended, that omniscience, omnipotence, and mastery of all things become clearly manifest. This is the creative intuition. The scholar Mark Deskowski goes on to say, there's no split between the cognizing subject and the things he wishes to perceive. The instant the state of cognitive intent prevails. In the same way, nothing in the universe is severed from the Supreme Self. Describing perception as just such a practice, the same scholar notes, to catch the initial moment of perception when the power of the will to perceive is activated. It is the subtle state of consciousness that reveals the presence and nature of its object directly. One must then remain thought-free, not move on from the first pure sensation of the object, and return to its original source in his own consciousness. Doing this consistently as a practice and honing our awareness can help us progress to attaining and remaining in that state that is our birthright. What I'd like to do now is take a few minutes to try this practice and see what we experience with the practice. And I'm just going to repeat the steps of this experiential segment. What you want to do is catch the stage of the impulse of cognitive intent or your will. It's almost like what happens right before you're going to make a fist. You can feel that there's a tiny little, almost like a nerve impulse getting ready to do it. That's the stage of the perception you want to catch, right before, prior to looking at something, because we're going to use vision in this case. Then as you do that, as you catch that state, what you want to do is remain thought-free. Don't start naming, don't start labeling. That's what gets us out of that state. And then ahead of time, it's good, let's all just say it to ourselves right now, that we're going to follow that back to its source. You don't have to think about how it's going to happen. You don't have to follow a little stream of something. All you have to do is say it. Set yourself up for it, and you know what to do. There's a part of you that knows what to do, and it'll do it. So, and then staying there, see what happens. Pay attention to what happens. If you find yourself kind of losing it, start it again. It's quick and easy, actually, once you get the hang of it. And you might want to start by looking at, you might, peanut gallery. You might want to start by looking at, you can look at the back of the head of the person sitting in front of you. You can pick your hand up, just look at your hand, or suddenly look at your pen or your watch or something. But pick something close by. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it quietly, do it on your own, and if you need to or want to start it more than once, go ahead. And then we'll have a little bit of a time to talk about what, if anything, people would like to share. So you can do it with your eyes open. Obviously, you have to see what it is that you're looking at. It's a perception exercise. And it also gets you used to staying in that state without your eyes closed, with your eyes open. Okay, slowly stay in the state, but allow your awareness to also return to the room if your eyes have been closed. And you can slowly open them when you're ready. And if you want to jot a note or two that might be useful for later, that would be fine. Would anybody like to say something about what they experienced? Or ask a question or whatever?
I was surprised to see how many steps there are in between that first moment and the actual object. Also surprised that it seems to come from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
From my eyes.
Yes. That's very profound. Yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Anybody else? What was that experience like of going back to where that impulse came from? Yes, back there.
For me, it was very restful and felt empty. Like there's nothing there.
Uh-huh. Good empty. It sounds like a good empty. Yeah.
I find a great time to practice this exercise in the morning when you first wake up, because you're in a pretty deep state anyway, and for those first few seconds when you wake up and you start looking around the room and you start recognizing and remembering where you are, it's very easy, because you're not even, you haven't identified the objects in the room yet, and then you can just step back at that point and go back inward to the source. So if you want, you can practice that at home, obviously. I find that helpful.
There's a set of slides I didn't use for this talk because I didn't want to go over time too much, but it's a known fact that with infant perception, with very young infants, what they see is as if you're standing on a mountaintop and you're looking at the town in the distance, and you can't really make out all the buildings and everything, and it's all kind of like one big unit. And that's the state, that's the kind of image of the state of Sadashiva, of the upper Tatfas, where there's a oneness with that, and because there is that oneness and you can't make out any one thing, you naturally feel kind of a oneness with it. It's like it's all one piece. And it's really, the more science learns, the profundity of how much Kashmir Shaivism has to say about that from millennia ago is really pretty amazing, because that's how they too talk about that particular state, that state of oneness. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, I can't resist this, and I probably, but I chose as the object that picture.
Uh-huh. I wondered if anybody would.
Yeah, I mean, I swear there's a face right here. Anybody sees that?
Oh yeah,
I
kind of.
also had this image of this human body holding out their hands to me. It's like, wow.
Wow.
So it was just gorgeous.
Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I have another question.
Sure.
Do you have to have like an object, or can you just be, I don't know, feels like just space?
Well, using perception of external, this one is set up to use the perception of an external object, yeah. Can you work with just space? Sure. Sure. Sometimes you can just drop into a place of peaceful space, and that's good too. That's a great meditation technique, yeah. Uh-huh. Yes.
I wound up focusing on the sculpture there.
Uh-huh.
It was very beautiful and very sort of kind of personality. It was almost very present to me.
Like it was alive?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very profound experience too. That because what you see, go ahead. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Go ahead.
Well, I think I more or less said it. I can repeat some of it. It was very peaceful. It was very, a sense of unity. But the most striking thing was how present it became in a live way to me.
That's fantastic. That's a very, very profound kind of meditation experience that this system would describe. Yeah. You find that's that living light. Part of what you're picking up is that there's that Shiva, that the universe is actually living light. And it looks like that all the time. We're just not on that plane all the time, consciously, to see that it looks like that all the time. These realized beings go around in a they see things totally differently than we do. They see the same things, but they see them living. And they see no separation between me and you. There's actually a Catholic contemplative nun, just one little story, by the name of Bernadette Roberts, who's written several books. And she has obviously attained very elevated state of being. You can tell by the way she writes. But one thing she says is an experience she had was, she said the way the universe is, it's as though, it's like a balloon that if you tried to pinch a piece out of it, you couldn't do it. That the universe is really like that it's all one thing. There's really no empty distance between me and you that's empty with nothing, that make us look like two separate objects. It's all Shiva, from back here all the way through there, all the way through there, and everywhere. And in the higher states, you get those kinds of experiences of it. Yeah. Anyone else? Close up. It's kind of into lunchtime now.
Excellent.
Thank you.